Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar. We've got people from all over the world attending. That's why morning, evening, afternoon. What are we going to talk? So first off, my name is Rick Banfelman. I'm VP of Sales at MyWorkDrive. What we're going to talk about today is version 6.3 and our roadmap. So here's the presenters today. Dan Gordon is on the left, our CEO and founder. Scott Miller, VP of Engineering on the right, and that's me in the middle. And we'll go on. A couple of ground rules before we start. You can access the chat window at any time and put your questions in. We will answer them at the end of the presentation. So as you have that thought, you can put that in. And also, I had quite a few people tell me that they had team members that were not able to attend. So we will be sending out a link to this webinar when we're done that you can feel to distribute any way you want. What kind of customers? Well, let's talk about MyWorkDrive first. This theme that I'm about to mention will resound throughout the presentation. I'll say it more than once, and probably Dan and Scott will as well. We are secure file share remote access from any OS stored on any platform without vendor lock-in. Customers include enterprises, governments, higher education, healthcare. I would imagine most everybody on the call recognizes all or some of these. Certainly not all of our customers, but some highly recognizable ones that we're very proud of having as customers. For today, what are we going to talk about? Well, we've already started with number one, what is MyWorkDrive? Then we're going to go on to the client-side demo, the server demo, and then we're going to show what's coming in 6.4 on the roadmap and do a demonstration of some of those capabilities. And as I mentioned again, Q&A at the end, and we'll leave enough time to cover all the questions, hopefully. Here's that theme again, secure file share remote access. Instantly add cloud file sharing capabilities to Windows file shares without VPN, syncing, or migrating. And what does that give you? Better security and control using existing infrastructure, again, without VPN, no vendor lock-in, no storing files in databases. We leverage your current infrastructure, your Active Directory, your underlying NTFS permissions, and we expose those through the MyWorkDrive server. How do you access files via MyWorkDrive? 3 access methods: the web browser, no plugin required. The map drive, that is a client for both Windows and Mac, very lightweight, and it gives you the mapped drive functionality that people are used to. And we have a mobile client. You can choose to load that as well for iOS and Android, but also if you don't want to do that, you can just access through the browser on those devices themselves.
Great, thanks, Rick. I'll just go over the network overview, kind of how it plays out in terms of where the MyWorkDrive server sits. So on the right, you'll see the SMB server. Those are your file servers. It could also be a NAS appliance. And you also have your Active Directory. So that's your infrastructure that you already have, or one that maybe you set up in Azure or AWS. The MyWorkDrive server is in the middle. That is a virtual appliance. Typically, you can download that and install our software on a Windows server. We also have an image up in Azure and AWS as well. But you'll notice there's no actual files on the MyWorkDrive server. It's just an in-between way for users to be able to access files. And on the left, you'll see the various clients that we have, the desktop, mobile, browser, and then we have online access through Office 365 functionality as well. So as I mentioned, we do have the Office Online editing. We're unique in that we allow customers to be able to edit documents online, but save them back to their Windows SMB-based file shares. So you don't have to migrate files up into a cloud storage provider. You can edit and co-edit documents online. We also support editing in the browser through local Office, and we give customers multiple ways to be able to do that. They can do it with OneDrive functionality. They can do it with their own lockdown SharePoint site. We also support Office Online Server, local server. or only Office for doing that integration as well. We put quite a bit of work into the compliance and security features that are built into MyWorkDrive. That is a lot of the advantage that we have and what customers have been asking for quite some time. Not only do we allow you to be able to maintain and keep control of your own storage, we support a layer on a bunch of different security features, such as, of course, two-factor authentication. We support SAML to single sign-on, which, for example, Azure AD, Okta, things like that. We allow you to block different file types and get alerts on that. We also have new in 6.2 was our device approval for different client devices. So you can even decide that you will need to have customers, employees be approved before those devices can access the MapDrive client. We also support pre-auth for identity providers. So we've got some customers that might want to use conditional access policies in Azure AD, and we also support that so that they can put that and layer that even in front of the MyWorkDrive server security for sort of like double security. We support data leak prevention and encrypted view and watermarks, so that Rick will go into some of that. DLP also supports MapDrive, so end users can actually access and work with files and view files through the MapDrive, not just through the web interface. And then we have a whole bunch of external guest folder sharing, collaboration integration that we built in with Azure B2B that allows you to be able to share folders with people outside of the company so that they can collaborate side by side with your internal workers. So all of that is geared towards all the different security requirements of CMMC, FedRAMP, HIPAA, things like that. And again, because we don't store any of your files, it just makes us automatically compliant with a lot of those certifications. Okay, great. I'm going to turn it over to you, Rick. I'm going to make you the presenter, and I'll let you start the demo.
Okay, thank you, Dan. As soon as I get my little window that says I can share, we'll do it. And now I have it. Great. All right, hopefully everybody can see my screen. That's fine. Move that over there. All right, so we're going to start out with the client interface. Then we're going to go, and clients, I should say. Let's just jump right in. So right here, I'm pointing to the MyWorkDrive server. That is the URL of the MyWorkDrive server. So we're starting with the web client. In this case, I'm going to log in with my NT credentials, my regular user ID password. If we were using, as Dan mentioned, Okta Azure AD One login, you just flow right in. So we support all flavors of single sign-on. So let's just do that. And every one of our clients is going to access that URL of the MyWorkDrive server. Notice here, say, oh no, it's a demo, we have an error. No, we do not. This is a warning, not a warning, I should say, information. Data leak prevention has been applied to one or some of the shares. Just going to close this one, and this is, I'll hit that one in a minute. But here's a demo share that I like to use and talk about. So in MyWorkDrive, we have a built-in viewer for just about every file type out there. So like PDFs, JPEGs, all of that. So we have a built-in viewer. Let's talk a little bit about this ribbon up on top. This is a dynamic ribbon. You can see we can, first of all, let's talk about it. You can create folders. You can store favorites. You can traverse up and down. You can refresh. You can upload files. You can add new things. So I'm just going to do a single click on this file. Well, notice here that these are my capabilities. Someone else might have read-only access. So again, this is going to go dynamic, and those things, obviously that's what would happen. So I can share internally, share via OneDrive, and share Outlook online. I'll talk about sharing more in a minute, but I just wanted to cover all of that. So let's go here and I'm going to double click. So I always say our claim to fame is our interface, and as Dan had alluded to, with collaboration in Office 365. So I just double clicked on this because I've previously logged into Office 365. I'm in Office 365. Here's a document. All of us on this call, be a little unwieldy because there's like 50 of us, but if we all had access to this file, you would see a little toast of who's making what changes here. You'd click on edit, of course, and that's when you would do it. It is truly Office, truly collaboration, all of that. Every keystroke is changed immediately back to the file where it lives. So there's nothing for the user has to do, say, oh, did I save the file? It naturally goes back. So let me move this out of the way and close this out. There we go. Oh, I want to go here. Let me close that. And here we are. We're back here. So that's how that works. Office 365, obviously that's PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. That's how all of that works. Let's talk a little bit more about what if we don't have Office 365? Well, fear not. We have Edit in Local App. If I do this, this is going to launch my Office that's installed on my local machine. And we have many customers that like the web interface, but don't have Office 365, or in a lot of cases, they're migrating there, so we can meet all of those needs. You can also globally cause a double click to open up locally rather than in the web browser. So let's talk about a couple more things. You can choose to show people's home drives if you want, their home directories. That's a switch, it's a global switch in the admin panel. Guest sharing. We talked about sharing a little bit in this ribbon up here, but we have something where we leverage Microsoft's B2B functionality, where we've automated that process, where you can invite people via an email address to a guest share. Later on, when Scott talks about it, he may go into a little more depth on how that works, but we can work with you to get that working. So people that aren't currently in your Active Directory, you can via an email address do that, and there's ways that happens leveraging that. Data leak prevention, now we'll talk about that. What I did here is I copied everything here in this share, but put it in a different share, and I put our DLP on it. So here's a document that's, if I do this, before you saw me open it and it opened up in Office 365. Well, this is, I call this data leak prevention at its finest, and it's most secure. This opens up a document, even, so here, ABC company, internal use only. This is customizable watermark. You can choose to show it or not. And also everything in MyWorkDrive is logged. Here's the user, the date and time stamp. It's important to note, I call this you can look but not touch. There, in this particular instance, the user can't edit it. They can't copy paste, they can't print it. So this is why we are compliant with, there was a screen Dan had up earlier, FINRA, FedRAMP, all of that, because we can make it so that the data never leave where it lives, but it gets accessible by the user. So let's just go back here to here. And so that sort of covers pretty much data leak prevention. I'm going to cover it some more in the map drive because we're unique that we are able to do that as well. Let's see, data leak prevention, guest share, all of that. I think I'm ready to move on now to our map drive. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I like to do here is first go here. And I call this a pre-MyWorkDrive scenario. We have C, D, and E drive. Most people probably have that type of situation. And again, that we don't know anything about MyWorkDrive at that point. So here is the MyWorkDrive client. It's a very lightweight client. It can be a silent install. So the admin can install this when people get on the network and it just installs. And I'll show you what it does here. So I'm invoking it. Here's that same URL I talked about that we saw with the web client. And these are my same credentials. I chose for this demo not to do map at startup, but if I did, when I turn my machine on, boom, I'm right in and I can see all of my shares. So I'm going to do that right now. Going to log in. So let's go here. here is C, D, E, H, J. These are my WorkDrive drives. The user doesn't really know where they're coming from or care, but they're accessible. So this is a time where I like to say, people ask, do you provide training? Yeah, we could, but we don't need to because our interface is so easy. The web browser is like Windows Explorer. This is a traditional map drive that people are used to. So if I go here, here's that same list we saw earlier from the web client. So if I go here, double click, this is exactly what you would expect. This is, in this case, it's opening or invoking my local office on my machine. I can do anything I want. I can enable, in this case, it wants me to enable editing, but I can edit this whole document and do what I want. And when I close it, all my changes would be saved. I didn't make a change, but if I did, it would give you your standard message, do you want to save changes? Now, this is a good time to talk about record locking. What if I have this open and other people have this open? Well, the first one that has it open, the rest are going to get, hey, this is locked. Standard Windows file locking, and you would get that message. And when we get into the admin panel, we'll talk about locks a little bit more, but we support record locks. Everybody asks about that, and yes, indeed, we have it. So again, this is what you would expect in a map drive scenario. And I used to say, except for two exceptions, now I say, except for two enhancements. One is the ability when you load this client to say, I don't have local office. I want this opened in Office 365. And that will do that. So think back when I first started, a double click would open this up in Office 365. We have clients that do that. They don't have Office locally, but they often open it up in Office 365. The other enhancement is the ability for the administrator to use our allow list or block list for file types. Pretty obvious what those do, but I'll just, for example, an allow list. Maybe just Office files, JPEGs, PDFs. That's all a user could put in this folder. Or conversely, block lists, PSTs, EXEs, or anything else that you don't want them to do. That's it. So that covers the map drive. And let's quickly go into mobile. In a webinar, I don't like to start up my iPad and do all of that. So I've done some screen captures, but you will definitely get the idea. Our mobile client is, here it is, App Store and Google Play, so Android, iOS. This is what it looks like. We'll respect the SAML ADFS login that you use. You can choose your view. In this case, this is the view, or you can use thumbnails. You can see it that way. So in this case, if I were to click on that market definition doc, it opens up in read-only mode. There it is. Okay, maybe that's all I need to do. Or maybe I want to take this as an attachment and email it out. Now, keep in mind that this is all based on your underlying NTFS permission. So if you're not allowed to do this, and you're only going to be in read-only mode, you won't be able to do some of this functionality. But there it is, and I'm adding it as an attachment. Now, what if I need to do some light editing maybe before I do email this out? I'm at a Buffalo Bills football game, possibly, and I want to do that. I guess I'm a fan of, right? That's where I'm from. Open with Word. So let's open it, and there it is. And I say light editing because I'm especially on a phone. On an iPad, sure, I can definitely do some editing, but here I could do some editing. Someone's just trying to get in. I see an admit there. It says, I'm the host. I will admit that person. There we go. Okay, so that's that. Now, let's talk about this. Here's that same document. And what happens, it's very unlikely that you're not online all the time in today's world. But if you know you're going to be on Southwest Airlines with really poor internet, you're going to say, well, maybe I want to download a file before I work on it for my device. You can certainly do that. You tell it where you want to store it in the downloads, and then you can access it. And when you get online later on, you can put it back. Here's a case where I'm taking my insurance ID cards in an email, and I'm going to save those back to a MyWorkDrive share. In that case, it's completed forms. That's pretty much it, how the client works. And this is just an example of we can work with applications that are on that mobile device, PDFs, Here's PDF expert. I could actually open up a PDF, fill it out. It would save back if it's an intelligent PDF. That's what PDF expert support. You can store Slack conversations on a MyWorkDrive share, just showing you how that works. And then again, keep in mind, as I said earlier, you don't have to load the client on those mobile devices. You can just go to the browser and do it that way. So you have your choice. So those are the 3 access methods. And now we're going to leave the client world and go into our administration interface. So this is the URL of the MyWorkDrive server that as an administrator, I can access. So I'm going to go in with my credentials. And here's the things I can do. So share settings, and I'm going to touch all of these lightly. When Scott gets on, he'll hit some more with what he's going to show and maybe go into some more depth. Here is first thing people are going to do is shares. I'm going to do it a little differently than I do normally. I'm going to call this demo organization. If I could type, this is how you know it's live, right? I'm going to do this. Okay, and the reason I'm doing this is I want to show you the path is UNC path. And I'm going to give this a drive letter. I don't think I'm using O, so I'll use that. And I'm going to turn these little couple of features on. So if you can remember when Dan had the diagram up, in the middle here was the MyWorkDrive server. That server doesn't have anything on it but configuration files. At this point, we're telling the MyWorkDrive server to look to the right at the current environment. So when I click on import, it's actually looking out and saying, hey, what do you have out there? What's your current infrastructure? What does this look like? There it is. It brought it back. So I have that. I'm now done getting this ready to share. If I do a save, there it goes. It's done. I'm going to just open it up for a second and edit it and show you. This is pretty neat on what we have. You can do this globally in the administration panel. We have customers that say, you know what, we don't want mobile at all. So you can turn that off globally, or the same with MapDrive client, web client. We have people who just use one of those. In this case, I have that on, but I could do something like maybe administrators doesn't make sense. I don't want them doing anything because they're administrators. They're not actually going to work on my files. I can do that. I'm not changing their inherent permissions, but I am changing them through access through MyWorkDrive remotely. So I'll just turn those back on, but you get the idea that I can mix and match by users, groups, and everything, what they can do. I can even do more granular editing inside if I choose to do that, but for sake of time, I'll just do this. I did the save, so that's already done. So that actually is out there now. So if I were to go very quickly, go here and log in back to the client, and we get our little message there. There we go. There it is. There's accounting, HR. Okay, that's how easy it is to set up a share rather than kind of go the other way in there. Let me just get this. Okay, now I do that all the time. There we go. Now I'm back into the admin panel. And we'll go here. So we covered shares. It's an easier way of doing it than dissecting it that way. Real quick, I'm going to touch on locks we talked about earlier. What happens if somebody gets up and goes to lunch and they don't come back? Well, some other people never need to get in there. They can call the administrator. They can break the lock. I should say reset the lock so that file becomes available. You can also set timeouts and things on locks as well. Sessions. If there is a reason that you need to terminate a session for somebody, you can do that. If I click on sessions, you should be here. You should, I'm in here twice, but well, there you go. I can terminate one of those. So you can see everybody that's on there. I think I'm pretty much done. Here's that guest sharing we talked about. That's pretty much that. Let's go into settings. I'm going to motor through now because my typical spiel goes about 30 minutes and I got 5 minutes more to go. Licensing, when you do a trial, you get 2 weeks. You don't need a license. You get a trial license, so to speak, but you don't have to put anything in there. Typically, people use our cloud web connector to get the MyWorkDrive server on the internet. And in that case, you would just, if I turn this on, your access point would be abccompany.myworkdrive.net. In reality, you could use a reverse proxy, go, put an SSL cert on the MyWorkDrive server. But to get up and running quickly for a trial, that's how you would do. The rest of these are all settings files. Are you going to use Office Online Edit? All of these are well documented. And if you want a personal demo, we can go into those further. But I just want to cover these real quickly. What do you want the double click action to be? You're going to require SSL. You could let people use an email format to log in and we'll resolve it back. This may as well say Duo, which Dan alluded to earlier. Most single sign-ons now have pass-through single sign-on. I'm sorry, most of like Azure AD and all of that built in. So you can choose to use that or not. We support that. This is where I talked earlier. We have granular. You can say people can use web, MapDrive, and all of that, or you can disable the web client totally, only allow the MapDrive client. Here, you could turn that off. We talked about the allow list and block list. We have a lightweight Teams app. Here's that OneDrive sharing, Outlook sharing we talked about in the web browser. And here's some other things. You're using an outbound proxy. Do you want to show that home drive? And here we have some limitations. You can limit file sizes, things like that. And here's, if you have multiple domains, you can put those there for searching across, and session timeouts, things like that. Enterprise, single sign-on, just turning that off so you can see what is supported. There you go. And we have manual, meaning, hey, we've come across some. I think one was called simple sign-on. That wasn't simple, but we worked with that, and that's what we do with templates. And then here you can globally prevent downloads. These have to do with our data leak prevention. And then here you saw that watermark. Well, that's where that came from. You can customize that. You can choose to show that or not. And then we have, you can get back to our previous versions. That has to do with Windows file shadow copying. So you can get back to a previous version. Branding, you can change the logo, right? Make this very personal. Whatever your company name is. Here's a bunch of logos I have. Here just happens to be one. I can do this. There's someone's logo. So now that's going to be pervasive throughout all the logins and everything from all the different clients. Let's go now to devices. Very cool feature that we added. You can make it so devices have to be approved for the MapDrive and mobile before they can access. So it was actually pretty interesting. I had to call Scott saying, hey, I'm locked out. It says I got to call you to be put in here, and he turned the switch on. It was great. I said, oh, that's how that works. Clustering, you could cluster MyWorkDrive servers together so that the configuration files talk to each other, so you don't have to, you could do that manually and copy the configuration file out, or you can enable clustering and do it that way. That would require Enterprise Plus to do that. Alerts, I like to talk about this one. We got download, delete, shared, blocked. Well, 100 files in 5 minutes, maybe somebody wants to know that. So, and again, all the same with these, and you'll get an email alert on that. We all get lots of emails, but this is one you probably want to pay attention to. Logs I talked about earlier. We talked to syslogs, Elk, Splunk, Sumo, so we can talk to your syslog server. You provide the information and we'll pass our log data off to those log aggregators. Let me just go back here because I went out to lunch there. Here we go. So read. So this is what I've done. This is all MyWorkDrive related. Who did what when? In this case, you saw me do I didn't make any changes, but if I did, you would have seen that. Here's a login. You saw all of that. So these logs are very good. And for client compliance auditing purposes, this is very, very valuable. You can also just export it as an XML file as well. Health, I'm just going to bring up. This is something that was just for developers. And so you can see things here. In this case, I am licensed with Enterprise Plus. Here's my free space, all of this. It can be very useful for the admin themselves, or if you get on with our support, they ask you to bring that up and they can see what's going on. Wizard, you saw me do that. I did the share earlier. I showed the organization. This will walk you through the very first time. You can choose to use it or not. It'll just walk you through for your very first share. That's kind of it, guys. Anything I left out? So let's see. I think I have to. Dan is the host now. Okay, Dan, you can go with it.
Thanks, Rick. That was fabulous. It was really informative. Great job squeezing that in to 25 minutes. So,
I did it by 30. It's what I always do.
Awesome job. I'm going to just share my screen for just 1 second, and then I'll flip over to Scott. Okay, Scott is going to be talking about our 6.4 stuff that we're working on. We have external public file sharing, which is different than our guest B2B sharing. It's more the traditional link sharing type of interface and how we uniquely do that with MyWorkDrive. We're going to also add support for mounting OneDrives as locations in the web client, the mobile, and the map drive, as well as SharePoint storage. We've had a lot of feedback from customers for quite a while where they would like to be able to have, for example, maybe users might use OneDrive for instead of a home drive, but then they still need access to the department shares. So this is a way for them to be able to see that in one interface, single pane of glass. And I will now pass it over to Scott.
Got it. Thanks. I think you all can see from the demo Rick motored through. I recognize a lot of the names on here with us. I know a lot of you have been on demos with me and Rick, and I think you can tell that I'm the X factor that makes Rick's demos go long, because Rick got through that all pretty quickly. But let me jump in and I'll show you, as Dan mentioned. We'll start with public sharing, and then we'll get into SharePoint and OneDrive. This all is functionality we're in process on. I think the first question everyone's going to have is, well, when can I have it? And especially the folks whose names I recognize on the call are probably here for this part of it more than anything. And we're still working on it, so it's not all quite polished, done, and ready, but we've got it pretty far along, long enough to show you anyway, at least these two pieces. So I'm just going to log in. Let's start off, as Rick did, with the user experience. I'm going to start off in the web client, and I'll show you that public sharing, that link sharing. As Dan mentioned, it is different than our B2B integration and the guest user sharing that exists now, and a lot of you are already using, in that, that's bringing someone in as a, really as a full contributing member, and as a, having their own domain account, so to speak. What this link sharing, or this, what we're calling public sharing, is more akin to what you'll find in other file share remote access or sync and share type products, which is the ability to take a given folder or a given file and make it available remotely. So in the web client, what you'll see first off is you'll see a new little silhouette of a person icon on any files that are, or folders that are currently shared. So in this folder here, I've already shared this MyWorkDrive quotes folder out with someone, and I'll show you how to manage those here in a moment too. But if I just right click on this, or I take from the menu, as Rick showed you in the sharing menu, you'll notice in sharing a new item called share publicly. Now I will say, I'm going to show you the admin side of this in a minute. Don't worry that you're going to give unfettered access to the world to your internal file shares. You're not. Administrators still have absolute control over all this stuff, and I'll show you how to adjust those settings within share level, within some of these parameters. But if I click share publicly, I'll get a new window that gives me some options. Now, file is different from folder. I'll show you folder in just a second here. But individual file, I can set downloadability. I can choose whether I want to give it a password or not for access. And I get a share link. Now, if I take the share link, I'm going to share this with someone else and send this outside of the organization. So whoever I've shared this with, I'll just open a private browsing window here, and I'll show you what that looks like as a user. So just click the link that I got in my email, or I got in Teams or whatever. And in this case, it's just a file. So it's going to open up in our viewer, and this file is watermarked and secured. And of course, this is just an example file, so it's empty, but the user gets the ability to see and operate on this file. Now, if I were to have shared a folder, go ahead and do one of those. Now this folder is already shared. So what you'll see is I already get my sharing link, but of course I can make changes. Maybe I'll take away the ability for this person I'm sharing this folder with to do uploads. I'll take that away. So I'll go ahead and update my link, and then we'll do the exact same thing. I'll take this out and I'll open up a private browsing window, because in this case now I get a folder. So I've got a little web client where I can see the existing files. Again, I've upload would be here if I hadn't taken it away, but I could download, I could do, that light level of collaboration. It's not full guest sharing, so they're not a full member, but they have a little bit of access. If they double click, they again are also able to view the file. Again, these are just blank files because they're just testing, but you've got that functionality. So if and I've got a number of ribbons here to run Zoom, so just get stuff out of the way here. So you can see now I've got this icon on this file because I've already shared it out. Well, what if I want to see what I already have shared? Obviously, I'm not going to drill into every folder in my file system to find that. You've got the ability to see your shared links. So I shared 2. You saw that on my call here. Of course, administrators have the ability to see all of them, and you'll see that here in just a moment. So again, I can sort of quick view of what parameters I've given these. If I need to edit any of those, I can edit them. If I just need the link again, or if I need to remove them, right, I could just click them all and delete them and say, oh, these are gone. Now, these have an expiration date. If they expire, they'll stick around for a little bit. Administrator controls how long they stick around. So you could re-enable them if you were working with someone on something and the link had expired and they said, hey, I'm still working on that with you. I need to get back into it. Now, this is web client. These also exist in the map client. So let me do that. But the Zoom, somehow I got a Zoom bar that's floating on the bottom now. I'm going to sign into the MapDrive client. The one difference in the MapDrive client is we didn't try to give you a management interface. We didn't see a need to manage existing links from here. So that piece doesn't exist. But if I were to say, go back into that same share that I was using a minute ago, got that sales folder, and again, files and folders, you can right click and you get that. Of course, this is 11. So we got one extra little hop, but we got that share publicly. You get a very similar looking window. Again, these are slightly different between file and folders, so different option exists with the ability to create that link, copy and paste, send it off, and share with other people. So this is a feature that a lot of people have been asking for. So I got somebody here got some people in the waiting room here. I want to admit real quick. This is some functionality that I know a lot of people have been waiting for, but very interested in because it's much more simple to deploy than the full guest sharing. It doesn't require integration with Azure AD or Enterprise App or anything of that nature. It's very simple and straightforward. So let me show you how simple and straightforward that is. Let's pop over to the server. This is my MyWorkDrive server. Just get signed in here. What you'll see first off is that we've deployed a new tab, public sharing. Of course, this now is 6.4. The admin panel you saw earlier that Rick was sharing was 6.3, so there'll probably be some subtle differences in here. I'm going to just hit on a couple of them. First of all, we've consolidated the sharing options. So OneDrive and SharePoint that Rick showed you in settings have moved over here, but then you've also got public sharing. Now, public sharing leverages delegation. Those of you who are using SSO, who've got Azure AD or Okta or OneLogin or any of the custom ones we can deploy. We just did Ford Authenticator. We've done Shibboleth. We've done Ping at Any. There's hundreds of these SSOs. Any SAML. We'll be familiar with delegation. If you're not using it, you're using traditional user pass and haven't needed, SAM accounts haven't needed delegation before, you will need delegation, but you're prompted to clean that up. So they've got some help in here to get that done. But here's where I mentioned you've got ultimate control. At the administrative level, you can set what's my maximum expire days. When am I deleting these ones that have expired to clean them out? Do I want to force people to use passwords? Do I even want to allow downloading at all? That sort of thing. And then you've got that master list of everything that's been shared, right? Not just the ones that I did this morning as a domain user, but then something I did previously, something another user did. Once you've enabled it, now, just like Rick talked about granular permissions on shares, this shows up as a new item on your shares. So when I go in here and edit, I've now got a master list for public sharing. I've now got a column for public sharing so I can control. And Dan, were you raising your hand because you had a question or you just, okay, you're good. I've now got the ability to control at the user and group level who has permission to it. Do I want it at all for this share? You'll say, well, the local share is fine, but you know what? Our primary file share, I really don't want public sharing at all. So we'll just turn it off. Simple. It's easy. It's that simple. It all disappears. That's pretty much public sharing. It's easy to interface. It's easy for the users to use. It was a lot of work for us to develop and make work on the back end, but that's always sort of the philosophy of MyWorkDrive is let IT do the heavy lifting and the difficult work. let's make it easy for the users. So talking about easy for the users, let's get into OneDrive and SharePoint. OneDrive and SharePoint. Now, we've been using OneDrive and SharePoint as the storage target for our Office Online editing for, 18 months, 24 months, quite a few versions now. Anyone who's deployed Office Online editing with MyWorkDrive in a current modern version has experienced that because you've set it up. You've either set it up with OneDrive or you've set it up with SharePoint service mode. And we're basically extending that functionality to give users access to their own files in their OneDrive folder or files that you define on the SharePoint site. So let me step back and I'll give you the user experience of that. Now, I will tell you, again, we're in development on this still, so I don't have it to show you in the MapDrive client yet. I'll just be totally honest and upfront about that, but it's coming. We're absolutely committed to doing it. Development is in progress. We just didn't quite make this webinar, which is fine. The target of this webinar was the 6.3 anyway. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of the new stuff. So what you'll see here, if we scroll down my share list, is I've got OneDrive and SharePoint. Now, I signed in, if you remember back to a few minutes ago when I signed into this web client, I signed in with my SAM account, my username and password, because I wanted you to see that when you go to OneDrive, it's going to do a secondary prompt to sign you into your OneDrive or your SharePoint with Azure AD or with your Microsoft account. So once I did that, and of course I'm already signed in on this browser because I've been using Office and other things, so it didn't actually pop up the prompt, but it did. And now I've got my OneDrive folder. This is my OneDrive folder. This is the same OneDrive folder as if I had opened up OneDrive through the Office portal or I had opened up OneDrive through File Explorer with the OneDrive app, right? But now it's through my WorkDrive. It's that single pane of glass that Dan mentioned a moment ago. To my WorkDrive, to your users, this is just a regular MyWorkDrive share. They don't know that they don't necessarily, well, other than the label and what I'm telling you, but they don't need to know it's a OneDrive account. I can create a folder in here. I can move files and folders between things. If I went back to that local share I had opened a minute ago, we'll go ahead and grab that. I'll grab this disclosures file. I'll just do a copy. Come back over here to my OneDrive folder. We'll click into that subfolder that I created a moment ago. And we'll paste. And you can see down here in the bottom corner, copy operation is going on. There's my file. I can view this just as I always would. In this case, I've got Office Online editing on. So there's my file, complete with my lorem ipsum. You can edit, if I need to delete. It's basically all of the functionality you're used to, except in this point, we're not using an SMB share or local share on the MyWorkDrive server or Azure Files. We're actually using OneDrive as our storage target. And you've got, like I say, all that functionality. There'll be some nuance when you're using OneDrive and SharePoint. Like if you want to edit this file in Office Online, we won't need to move it to OneDrive or SharePoint because it's already there. We'll be editing it natively where it exists. If you go to do sharing, we're going to support that same sharing and sharing publicly. But in this case, we use the Graph API to create a OneDrive sharing link. So you'll have the same functionality as OneDrive. You won't be using our public sharing off of an SMB share. But again, user experience, all exactly the same. And the same exists for SharePoint. Now, in this case, you can use a default SharePoint site or you can define your SharePoint site. I'm going to show you that in just a second, because just like we talked about with public sharing, this isn't just open carte blanche worldwide. You have control over what appears here, whether it appears here, who has access to it, and all that functionality. But again, I have on my WorkDrive folder. I can open these files. I can create folders. It's all the same functionality. So let's step over to the server and let me show you how you control this stuff. I mentioned earlier, this is really running on the same, backbone as our Office Online editing. In American colloquialism, we piggyback on it. In the IT world, we talk about leveraging that. But you enable it. You've now got an extra radio button to turn on OneDrive and SharePoint access. This is all basically the same as what you'd have if you just were using Office Online editing. But you enable it. You'll turn this on. You can, again, our default config is super simple, right? You just basically turn these things on, drop your email in here so you can be notified when provisioning is complete and it's available. So actually, we've even made it easy for IT administrators to deploy. Now, if you get into the granularity of using your own app registration up in Azure AD, using your own connector that's not our Cloudflare tunnel, there's a few more steps, but of course it's all documented. It's already all in our help desk. When you go into SharePoint, you get the extra ability to define SharePoint server URL, which isn't going to be the only site URL, but it'll be your default, of course. So we've enabled it. What you're going to see now when you go to add a new share is you're going to see a storage option. So of course, this is going to be our share. Name doesn't matter. That's just our label. Everybody's familiar with that in the MyWorkDrive world. But then I pick OneDrive, and again, I promised you this is coming to the map drive, even though I didn't show it to you. And here it is. It really is. And I've got that same granular permissions, right? I can turn things on and off by user. Now, here's where it's a little different. Rick showed you how we reach out to NTFS, or we reach out on SMB and we pull in those NTFS ACLs. Well, there's no NTFS ACLs for you to pull in OneDrive. So now what I've got to define who has access to this is I've got that same familiar MyWorkDrive window, except I'm going to be searching this to look up users and groups that I want to give access to this. And this is where now the old paradigm that I've been saying for 5+ years about how MyWorkDrive doesn't control your access, it's just pulling from NTFS echoes. Well, now that's a little untrue, because now we're actually defining who has access. But this is again, you've got absolute control over this. So you want to give OneDrive to all your domain users. You don't want to give it to admins. You don't want to give it, maybe you want to make OneDrive available to accounting, but you don't care about it for engineering. Any way that you subdivide your organization, group, role in the organization, work unit, however you define those things, you can control whether they have access. And that's OneDrive. Now they have their OneDrive account. SharePoint gets a little more fancy, like we talked about a minute ago. Now, if you take the default SharePoint site as we defined over on settings, it's basically the same. But if you turn that off, you've actually got the ability to pick what SharePoint site, and this little tooltip gives you an example of that if you needed SharePoint site example. And again, drive letter. So as I said, I promised, even though I didn't show it to you, we're bringing OneDrive and SharePoint to the map drive, to mobile, to obviously Mac and Windows, both on the map drive side, and you've already seen it in the web client. But you drop your path in here again to find who has control. You're off and running, supports DLP. That's really all there is to it. So yeah, that's what, didn't mean to click on logs. I meant to click on shares, because I wanted you to see, like, we have those ones I showed you that are currently running. I just wanted to show you that there was nothing unusual or magic going on behind the scenes. You saw me sign into that OneDrive account. It's exactly what I just showed you. It's just, it's running on queue and we've even got a difference of sharing here. So domain users can, but this service user account can't do public sharing. So that's the excitement that's coming. As I mentioned, we're a couple of weeks yet, I think, from being able to go to preview, but we're hoping to have this in your hands pretty quickly. With that, I will pass it back to Dan.
Thanks, Scott.
We could do our Q&A and a little bit of wrap up. Oh, did you take it back from me? Perfect.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah,
perfect.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna just share my screen again. And at this point, if there's anybody that has any questions, feel free to put them in chat, and we'll put them in there. Although I think Rick and Scott, you guys did such an amazing job.
I had one question left over from when I was talking, and that was just asking pretty much about a point of clarity between guest user access and our new what we call public sharing, or public sharing. And really, the when you would use one versus the other, guest user access I would use if you're maybe collaborating with someone you've engaged as a consultancy or another organization that you're going to work on an extended project on, and you want them to have full access to a share, and you want them to be able to use the native tools. You want them to be able to use the native MyWorkDrive web browser and the native MyWorkDrive map drive client. If you're just quickly sharing something with one other person, like you saw, I had like a sales quotes folder and a a support folder. If I'm sending you a sales quote, or I'm sending you a document that you need to work on, or maybe I'm sending you one set of files you need to grab one time, that's, if it's not an ongoing longer term engagement, I would use the public sharing. The public sharing doesn't support the end user side. The recipient side doesn't support the MapDrive client. They're just in the web client. Because again, it's just meant for, quick sharing, grabbing files one time, real simple, easy. If you've got that more higher level of engagement or relationship with someone who's in the consulting world, you need them to have more access, then I would provision guest user access.
All right, we do have a few questions that came in. One of them is, are you restricted to your file viewers, or could you for local viewer tools be used? From our web client, what we provide is what we provide that's built in. Of course, if you use the MapDrive client, you can use any tool that you want. Otherwise, it would have to be plugged into the software to be able to use a different viewer. So what most people do is they use the MapDrive client in those scenarios where they want to use. And then it's just whatever the default extension is, just like any MapDrive that you have out there. It's just going to use whatever your default extension is, or you can right mouse click and choose open with if you want to use a different program, such as Adobe PDF instead of Chrome to open a PDF. It's your choice. So we totally support that. There is a question in here about us being able to support paths deeper than 256 characters. From an SMB standpoint, that is something that we looked at pretty deeply. Unfortunately, the way Microsoft has designed File Explorer, it has a 255 character limit. So even if we instructed you to make those changes on the back end of your MyWorkDrive server and your file servers to be able to support it, users would not be able to access files except with some sort of a third-party File Explorer. So we're continuing to monitor that. Then we can, we will see what our options are. Certainly, as things change and progress on that, so that Windows File Explorer can start supporting that. Then we've got all our work saved, so we'll be definitely keeping a very close eye on that. If there are any other questions, feel free to reach out to sales at MyWorkDrive. Rick can also schedule a call with you. We're very excited about this feature, and we can see that it's going to be very good. In fact, we're going to switch ourselves over to it pretty quickly as well. So thank you very much for joining our call today, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.